Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So we are only a few hours after coming down off of our extended live stream, so our 8, almost 9 hour live stream where we had so much incredible support. We had such a good time, we had so many giveaways, so many different deck lists. We just had a really good stream. So if you guys like live form content and you get bored at some point, I know that it's 9 hours long, but scroll through some of that. I promise that there will be something in there for everybody. Overall, it was an incredibly positive stream. If you don't watch anything else from the stream, catch the very end. The last like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, were incredibly wholesome. And so moving on to today's video, we have a new featured location. And for any new players, every week on this day, on this reset, there is a new featured location. Typically, this is a brand new, previously unreleased location that is now introduced into the game. And to feature that location, it occurs in 40% more games than it would normally. And so you're gonna be seeing a lot of this location for the next 2 days. And the featured location that we ended up getting today was the Daily Bugle. The Daily Bugle, you will get a copy of a card in your opponent's hand. I think that this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, you could run something like a Quinjet, which is a pull 3 card. It reduces the cost of any cards that didn't start in your deck, aka whatever card Daily Bugle pulls. So if you want to run something with like a Quinjet, a Devil Dino, a Nick Fury, I have a deck list that we featured a couple of days ago that ran a Nick Fury, ran Quinjet. I'm going to leave the link in the description below. If you want to check out that video and that build, that would be great for today's featured location. However, this featured location, sometimes they're really impactful. Sometimes they feel like you have to build a specific deck around them or else you lose. It still feels like you can run whatever you want to run, and then you just might use the opponent's resource, or you just use it as information into what they're running. We're going to be running a deck that we actually used on today's live stream. We used it at the very end as our last deck that we piloted before ending the stream, and we had an incredible amount of luck with this deck list. And so I do want to kind of flesh it out a little bit further and kind of dive into it a little bit deeper. But that is the Asgardians of the Galaxy. Now, the original list or the idea was given to me by another content creator named Kraken Null. And then we made a small tweak by taking out one of the cards. We took out Adam Warlock and added an Odin as an additional kind of win condition or win trigger. So this deck is not likely to utilize whatever resource you get from your opponent, but what it can do is it can use that information to help position its power into a more ideal location. And so if the featured location comes up, that's okay. If it doesn't, that's absolutely fine as well. But let's go ahead and run through the deck list really quickly and what each card is. And so first up, we have Rocket Raccoon. Rocket Raccoon has the on reveal, if your opponent played a card here this turn, +2 power. So you're going to have to try to anticipate where your opponent is going to drop cards to be able to get the maximum upside from the cards in this list. Rocket is no exception. If you hit this on reveal once, he becomes a 1-cost 4-power card, which is one of the highest power 1-cost cards in the game. If you hit this twice, because you re-triggered it with Odin, that could potentially be a 1-cost 6-power, which just starts getting kind of nutty at that point. And it only gets crazier from there. Next up, we have Daredevil. He is here to help solidify your turn 5 play. If you can see where your opponent is going to drop their cards, you know where to drop your Gamora, or even a subset of something like a Groot and a Star-Lord, or a Groot and a Rocket Raccoon. You have a lot of kind of flexibility in what you can drop, and by knowing where they're playing cards, you can guarantee that those on reveal abilities will trigger. And then we have Star-Lord. Star-Lord has the on reveal, if your opponent played a card here, get +3 power. So he can become a 2-cost 5-power card, but of course that has the drawback of if you don't read the opponent's plays correctly, he can be just a 2-cost 2-power, which becomes really subpar at that point. And then we have Storm. Storm gives us a couple of win conditions here. She forces the opponent to invest resources into that lane, which will allow us to easily follow that up with a Drax, with a Groot and a Rocket, or a combination of any of our Asgard cards to be able to guarantee that that effect triggers, or if it doesn't, we can guarantee that we lock down that Storm lane by playing our cards there. Even if they don't trigger, it should give us the win in that lane. And then we have Groot. Groot is similar to our Star-Lord, to our Rocket. If an opponent played a card here this turn, you get +3 power. He can be a 3-cost 6-power or a 3-cost 3-power. So the difference between this being a really strong 3-cost card and a really bad one is if you can read your opponent's drops. That is going to be the common theme throughout this deck, and you always have a second chance to re-trigger with a potential Odin play. So if you don't hit it the first time, and you're not going to be perfect, but if you can re-trigger it at some point, you can still offer a lot of power push on those final turns. And then we have Thor. Thor is an incredibly powerful card right now. He has the owner reveal, you shuffle a Mjolnir into your deck, and then if we draw that Mjolnir, when it's played, it has the owner reveal give your Thor +6 power. So we can do some crazy things with like an Arnim Zola to destroy and copy the Thor. We can use an Odin to re-trigger Mjolnir so that Thor gets a double buff. That way we can push power in multiple lanes on that final turn. And it makes it a lot harder for the opponent to find a win condition. And then we have Wong. You know that we cannot go Wong by playing Wong. Wong has the ongoing ability, your owner reveal abilities at this location happen twice. So all of the cards in our deck list get an incredible amount of upside if they trigger once. If we drop that in an Odin lane and they trigger, all of a sudden we see that those effects happening twice, which is going to make them an insane value if we can get those to trigger consistently. And then we have Drax. Drax has the owner reveal if your opponent played a card here this turn, +4 power. So he becomes an 8 power card if we can trigger this, a 12 power card if we trigger this in a Wong lane, or we trigger it and then re-trigger it once again with Odin. The max power push or power potential of this card gets absolutely insane the more times you can get it to trigger. Most of the time he's going to end up being an 8 power card, which is still really good for a 4 cost slot. And then we have Gamora. Gamora has the owner reveal if your opponent played a card here this turn, +5 power. Just like all of the other Guardians of the Galaxy, she becomes really strong if you can trigger it once, if you can trigger it twice because of Odin, or something a little bit cheekier. Let's say you drop it in a Wong lane, it triggers twice. You can then hit it with an Arnim Zola to push it into your side lanes or your other 2 locations to re-trigger that owner reveal again, and she can get absolutely insanely strong, insanely quick. And then we have Arnim Zola. Arnim Zola will destroy a random friendly card at that location and add copies to the other locations. So when they get added to the other locations, their owner reveal abilities will re-trigger. So if we use this on a Thor, he will continue to push hammers into our deck. If we use this on a Gamora, she will trigger again. If we use this in a lane, which is going to be kind of our cheeky play line, if we use this in a lane that has a Wong and a Gamora, Arnim Zola will trigger twice. We can hope for some good RNG where it hits Wong first. At that point, it'll duplicate the Wong into your side lanes, and then your Gamora into the side lanes, which each of them will then trigger twice again for an absolutely insane power push. And then we have Dr. Doom. Sometimes we're content with the power level that we got in one of the lanes in our Wong lane, and all we have to do is push some power to one of the other lanes. Dr. Doom by himself is a 15 power presence on the board. If you do this in a Wong lane, he becomes a 25 power presence onto the board. So 10 power in each of the other lanes and then 5 power in his own specific lane as well. So the potential value of this card is phenomenal. So if you lock down a lane with Storm and you just need a little bit more power in that lane, Dr. Doom can help you lock it down. And then finally, closing out the deck, we have Odin. Odin will help us re-trigger all of these owner reveal abilities. So maybe we locked down the Storm lane, we are content in that location. And then maybe we just need to have a huge power push in one of the other ones. We can re-trigger our Mjolnir. We can re-trigger Drax, Star-Lord. Any of those cards with owner reveal abilities that are stacked in a lane, we can get some really good upside from the Odin play from this list. But that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Timo Tiny. So the Tiny Timo. We have our Daredevil, we have a potential Wong play, we have Star-Lord for the owner reveal trigger. I think it's safest for us to do a Daredevil here. And then maybe we try to curve into a Wong, Gamora, and then our Arnim Zola play. We do have one additional turn to do those things. So we could always do something like a Wong, Gamora, Dr. Doom, and then an Odin. That way we fill up the lanes with 4 Doom bots, and then we get a huge power push in the other one as well. I think Storm and Negative Zone would be our best bet because we don't have any like exceedingly high value cards or high power cards unless there are owner reveals. And so they played Lizard preemptively into the last location. It turned out to be Murder World. We're going to go ahead and snap off of that. That's a pretty big advantage. Them losing a potential 5 power card over here is pretty tough. And so then it becomes down to them either playing here or here this turn. We can start kind of anticipating where they play. We can most likely get a Star-Lord trigger in limbo. It's just an uphill battle at that point. So we pressed the advantage when we realized that they had the negative RNG to be able to lock in a 1 cube. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. We'll see a little bit more of the game this time around. All right, so next up we have Jujube, and the first location is Subterranean, which is really, really rough. It always feels so bad when you shuffle 5 rocks into your deck. Because now we have 13 cards to draw from, and if we're adding an extra one with Thor, it it makes it really, really tough to find those win conditions. So they drop a Nova right off the bat. That feels really bad. They probably have a Killmonger. They probably have a Hood to go into Camartage, I would assume. With their snap, that's just so ominous. I feel like they have a Hood. Oh no, the double Scorpion's pretty big too. So they're running kind of an aggro style list. They have the Scorpion, Nova. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Mysterio and a Carnage at some point. But it's just, the rocks that we're going to be drawing into. We've already drawn into 2. That is 3 rocks. How do you like those rock collections? They're absolutely massive. Let's mix up the... Let's mix up our deck even further by adding yet another card to draw into. Mjolnir would feel like an upside, but drawing into 3 rocks in a row feels so very bad. We'll shuffle 2 more cards into our deck. We actually draw one of the Mjolnirs. And so hopefully we don't want to draw too many Mjolnirs here. Let's go with a Groot into Subterranea. They might play a card there. I think we have Camartage locked down with a double Mjolnir. We don't have to worry about it. Ooh, they don't play anything on turn 4. Interesting. And so then we draw an Arnim Zola. Ooh, that's big. That's huge. That's massive. That's snapback. So the reason it's so massive, what we can do on turn 6, we can drop Mjolnir, and then we can drop Arnim Zola. Mjolnir is going to trigger twice. Arnim Zola will trigger twice as well, so it will destroy the Thor and the Mjolnir. Triggering it 2 more times in both the left and the right lane. We're going to trigger Mjolnir 4 times for a Thor in the left and a Thor in the right. And so unless they lock down a lane with like a Professor X, I don't think we have any concerns here. We're going to save Mjolnir. Hopefully they don't wave. Okay, so they Sarah, which I think is fine. 4 triggers onto Thor is an extra 24 power in both lanes. That's going to be a really, really hard play to beat. So let's go with... And actually the Wong would have been really funny. We could have done the Wong, but it could have messed up our stack over here. So maybe it's best that we didn't. Let's go with the Mjolnir first. Arnim Zola will trigger twice. It will kill both of these, push them to the left and the right. Let's hopefully collect our 8-cube victory here. They could have a Shang-Chi. If they have Shang-Chi, they have to preemptively drop it. Actually, they have initiative. So once our cards move, it won't matter. Unless they send us like a Goblin or something really negative. But I don't think they do. I think most likely they drop Killmonger. We'll take it. We will absolutely take it. They dropped Sarah. They probably drew into a lot of rocks, but we had the absolutely high roll of the Thor play. I really wanted to see that one play out. I mean, we got 4 cubes off of it, but I wanted to see it go off. That would have been so fun to see. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one, see if we can kind of keep this setup going, even with the bad rock RNG. We had a rock collection, but we found a path to win anyways. All right, so next up we have Gap. And normally at this point in the video, I call out our new channel members, our new channel supporters. But honestly, throughout the whole stream yesterday, we had so many new people join us as channel members. We had so much support throughout the whole thing. There's no way that I can list it all. So I don't want to miss anybody. And so if you want to check that out, there was so much positivity throughout the entire stream. There were so many people that helped support the channel yesterday, and I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate every single one of you guys that did jump in and help support the channel and help me as a creator. It means so very much. And so if you guys want to check that out, normally I read those out, but we just had too many. There's no way I could cover them all. Let's do a Thor into a Daredevil. It would have been better, or it would have been more energy efficient to do a Drax, but we just had no idea where they were going to play. The Destroyer on turn 1 is actually massive and kind of scary. Into a Murder World. If they snap, we have to run away. If they snap, we absolutely have to run away. Hopefully this last location is Bar with no name. No, it's Necrotia. Not going to do it for us. Unfortunately. So we can do a Groot play. If they play a card, I think they start stacking into Project Pegasus. There's no way that they play into Murder World knowing that it gets destroyed. So the Groot is a pretty safe play in Project Pegasus lane. Next turn, we can do a Drax, probably in Murder World. We're still looking for a win condition in these 2 lanes. We draw into the empty promises of Mjolnir, unfortunately. The thought of Thor's past is unfortunate. We will buff him in spirit by the end of the game for sure. I think we do the Drax in Murder World. And then we kind of look at what we draw next. Right now we don't have anything we could drop, and so it becomes really difficult. They do ramp, so they're going to be able to do a 6 cost. Ooh, they have the... Oh. they have the Ari Destroyer deck that we ran a while back, and so they now have 6 energy. They now have 2 swarms that they can drop to make it that much easier to push their Professor X into a lane. That's tough. That is their secondary. That is their biggest secondary kind of win condition or power push, is locking down a lane. And so I think we might just abandon Necrotia. And then knowing that Professor X is really their only other win condition besides something like a swarm, maybe we stick this one out. Depending on what they drop here, that we see with Daredevil, we might find a path to a win. The Destroyer on turn 1 into a Murder World Thor. It's so unfortunate. It puts us so far behind. But so there's the Adam Warlock and the Spider-Man play. And so that's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total power. But they can skip next turn. Oh, and all we have is a Wong. Oh no, that feels horrible. That feels Wong. Okay, let's go ahead and drop our Wong into Necrotia. We can do a double trigger of Mjolnir just for the lulz. We are going to drop a Dr. Doom into Necrotia on the final turn to push 10 power here and 10 power here. Even if they skip, they're going to have a total of 16 power in Project Pegasus. We're going to have 18, so I feel pretty confident. I think we run them off if we snap. If I was playing this and I was not trying for content so you guys could see the ends of the games, I would absolutely go for a snap here. The only potential issue that we see is that they could drop a Professor X in Murder World before our effect triggers. And they do have the 2 free swarms that they're going to be able to throw onto the board. So at that point, they can do 6, they can do 9 power, which will trigger, but then they lose this lane. Yeah. Yep, unfortunately, I think they probably dropped their Professor X here. If they drew it, I would absolutely drop it here. Our Dr. Doom can no longer push power here because it's going to be locked down before our Dr. Doom reveals, which is really unfortunate. But it is at this point kind of is what it is. Oh, okay. Do we think they skip here? If they skip here, their Sunspot goes to 16. We would need 8 total power in that lane to win. If they drop Professor X into Murder World along with their 2 swarms, Dr. Doom into Murder World would give us the win. That would be 9 power for a total of 10, and then our Dr. Doom pushes 5 power into Project Pegasus to allow us to still win that lane. That would push them up to 11. It would put us at 12. So it comes down to a read, and knowing this deck list, I'm going to say that they're going to play Professor X. That is their only additional like power push or power supply that they can drop. They know that we have a potential double Dr. Doom here, and they snapped anyways. So we're going to go with a gut feeling. We're actually going to snap back and push Dr. Doom, which feels bad. We're going to push Dr. Doom into Murder World, assuming that they do not pass, and let their Sunspot buff up. We hope to see 3 cards in Murder World. That is what we're looking for. Oh no, it was a gut check. It was a gut check and we did it wrong, unfortunately. Sometimes you're gonna have those bad calls. They are gonna happen. That one, unfortunately, we overthought it. We overthought it. The deck list, it has a Professor X. They could have dropped it here. And maybe in some games they would have. But this one, Gap opted to not drop any energy to buff up their Sunspot. The correct play would have been Dr. Doom into Wong. We would have pushed another 5 power there, which would have pushed us to 18. We would have locked in the win here and here. Just unfortunately, they went with the opposite of what we read, which is going to happen from time to time. It's a bad beat. That's 8 cubes lost. Okay, so I accidentally cut off the recording before I finished. It's a bad beat. That's going to happen. You just have to learn from it, move on, and move up. That one we took an educated guess, and so we used the information that we had about our deck and their deck, and we made an assumption. You're not going to get all of those right. It does feel bad whenever it doesn't go your way, but it's okay. You move onwards and upwards. So we are now going up against Yan Dnepr, which I haven't matched up with them very, very much since for a couple of weeks or a couple of months now. And every time we've matched up against them, they run a really strong, really, really good matchup deck. And so hopefully this is a good match, but I am glad that we're finally matching back up together. I'm glad to see that they are still on and they are still snapping. So Wakanda Lane will protect our cards. I think maybe we do a Star-Lord into the Daily Bugle. hope that they play over here. We don't know. Oh, they do play it into Wakanda. I didn't think they would stack their cards there since they can't be destroyed or moved. And so they have an Agent 13, which does another card. Interesting. So let's do a Thor into Wakanda. That's probably going to be our best bet. We could also do a Storm there, I guess. We could do a Storm into negative zone, but that takes out a potential Arnim Zola play. I like the idea of doing a Thor. We could always do a Thor or a Mjolnir into negative zone and an Arnim Zola, but it looks like they actually storm the negative zone instead. They storm it for us. So we can do a Drax as a follow-up in the flooded plane. We do now have Mjolnir. So we can always storm and then storm and go for a 50-50 flip that it hits, that Arnim Zola hits our Thor and pushes it here and here. I think what we start with is the Drax into the flooded lane, and then we look at it from there. Maybe next turn we draw into Wong. We can do a Wong and then a Dr. Doom and a Mjolnir to push a lot of power here and a lot of power into the left and right lane, at which point we consider that a win. We go ahead and snap. But if we don't draw into Wong, we kind of play it a little bit more cautiously. Okay, so they have a Sunspot and a Wolfsbane. They're running a pretty tempo-heavy deck, so that means they might not have any like really strong late-game finishers. Okay, so what we can do is we can do Gamora. We know that we have the extra 6 power that's going to push into Wakanda. I think we play into the Daily Bugle. That's right now their weakest link. Knowing that we can trigger Mjolnir at least once, but maybe a couple of times. I think we do Gamora into the Daily Bugle, and then we probably aim for a Dr. Doom and a Mjolnir for that final turn. If they pass very much, then their Sunspot is going to get quite a bit larger. At that point, it becomes a little bit tougher to win the flooded lane. Oh, they drop Spider-Man into Daily Bugle. That's not great for them. It's good for us, but not good for them. So if they pass all of their energy here, they lose Daily Bugle. They need to push power into Wakanda and into the flooded lane or into Daily Bugle, but the easiest win condition seems like the flooded lane and Wakanda. So maybe they do something that goes wide, but we're going to have something that goes a little bit higher and wide at the same time. So let's do the Dr. Doom. Let's do this. I would snap in this scenario, but I think he retreats if we do. Let's go ahead and just lock in the base play. We're going to do a Dr. Doom. We're going to do a Mjolnir trigger to push 11 total power in mid. We push 5 to the left and 5 to the right to make a pretty big, impactful play. Ooh, the Spider-Woman actually almost wins them Wakanda. The flooded lane was a 3 power lane, so we were fortunate that we were able to push that much power onto the board. And that we pushed so much power into the Daily Bugle as well, and that we were able to keep up with the tempo of their deck. And so that is win number 3. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one and see if we can keep it going. All right, so next up we have Nightwing. Let's go ahead and give him the good old Spider-Man point hello, and then we're going to go with something like a Dr. Doom for turn 1. We will pull into a random card into Grand Central on turn 5, so if we can structure that in a way that it's going to be a really impactful card, so something like Gamora, Dr. Doom, both would feel really, really good, then I think we can gain some upside. We're going to continue to try and curve out some of our cards. I don't think they play into Grand Central knowing that a random card gets pulled there. It's a little bit riskier to push power there early, knowing that you could pull into something that's just really bad for your location. And so that's why we pushed Star-Lord into the Titan location. We now have the tie versus the Lizard unless we end up capping that location out. And so for here, I think we go with a Thor. Let's curve all the way across. I think we go with a Thor into Monster Metropolis. That's gonna be our read. We don't need a match where they play, but I think that's a pretty decent win condition. If we can trigger Mjolnir twice, it becomes really hard for them to push power. This looks like a Cerebro 5 deck list, which is fun. It's not the most competitive, but it is a fun deck list. Where do we think they push a follow-up to Cerebro? I don't know that they mess with Monster Metropolis. They don't want anything to have +3 power, so they either change this location or they push power over there. But Cerebro 5, they don't have a 5-cost lane switch. So what they would have to do would be do something like a Magic, which would come on turn 5. So I think they play a card in Grand Central this turn. That's our read. That's what we're sticking to. Let's go ahead and do the Groot play. Depending on what we draw into next turn, we could do something else. We do hit the read with our Groot. We anticipate the anticipation. And so now their Omega Red is the Cerebro 5 that confirms the Cerebro 5. If we can cap out this location, That's gonna be big. We can do Doctor Doom next turn. On the final turn, we can do Mjolnir and then something else to help push and win this one. We pull into a random card here. Doesn't feel the greatest. What if we did something kind of structured like this? This is going to pull a Doctor Doom here. That forces exactly what is going to come out of our hand. And it's going to be the Doctor Doom. We can make sure that this caps out to make sure that the Lizard does not get the Cerebro bonus anymore. He becomes a 2 power card, and so he's going to lose 5 power because he won't receive the Cerebro buff. And then it also pushes some power into the far right. And then our Doctor Doom is a decent power push in Grand Central. That is, unless, I mean, they could change this one with the magic. Maybe they go with magic on us, and at that point we made the wrong read. No, they go with Sarah. So that's another 5 power card. Let's see what they pull into with their Star-Lord. Interesting. That was going to be a 5 power if we had played a card into Grand Central, but since we didn't, it turns out that it is absolutely fine. So we're winning the flooded lane. It comes down to which one can we win afterwards. Let's go with the Gamora into Titan. If they double down here, I think it's absolutely fine. We're going to take down the bonus from their Lizard, and I think it's easier than trying to compete for the Grand Central. If they win this one by 10 or more, Omega's Red's ability will trigger. It'll push 4 power, but I think even that is fine. Let's go with the Gamora into Titan. I think that should lock in the win. I don't think there's any way that they can compete with 19 power here, and this will be a 12 power play and then -5, so it's going to be an 18 power shift in Titan if we trigger the on reveal, and if we don't, it's still going to be a 12 power play because we have the 7 from Gamora and the -7 or the -5 from Lizard. Yeah, I didn't think that there was a win condition for them. We didn't gain a lot of cubes this time, but we did have them in a pretty big bind. So this location made it tough for them to play cards, and then we changed it so late in the game that they couldn't invest that many resources there. They couldn't reliably invest that many resources there. And so let's go ahead and try for another big cube gain so that we can recover the 8 that we lost earlier, which was heartbreaking. All right, so next up we have Safety Blade. And Safety Blade is really active on Twitter, really active on giving suggestions for different deck builds and things like that. So definitely worth a follow if you are looking for a little bit more variety of content as well. And so they have a Sunspot. I think we probably do a Daredevil into Mojo World. And then we start kind of building out our power. So we'll do a Thor into Baxter Building on 3. We can always do a Drax on 4 or something else if we draw into that's a little bit better. And that'll let us curve into an easier turn 5 drop by knowing where they're going to push power. And so, they changed the Mojo World, which is going to be interesting. It goes into an expansion. So after this turn, we're going to go to the RNG Casino. We're both going to get a random card. It might be good. It might be bad. But it's just what we deal with. And they actually have a Doctor Doom as well. So maybe they're running an Odin deck, but we need to keep an eye out for that. And the thing is, they don't know that we drew their Doctor Doom. They could actually have pulled our Odin, they could have pulled our Doctor Doom, our Arnim Zola, or our Drax. So all really good targets for them to have pulled, and it will give them quite a bit of information. The Electro ramp is kind of scary. They'll be able to drop a 5-cost card on this turn, which is definitely nerve-wracking. The Goose is pretty big. Ooh, but ours is bigger. So we have the thing. We won't be able to play any large power cards here. But overall, I think we're okay. So they ramped. They have 5 energy this turn. If they end up going with a Professor X, dropping our Wong here feels kind of bad. It would force us to have to win the Baxter Building lane. But otherwise, if they don't go with the Professor X here, maybe they just go with like a Devil Dino to push a lot of power. We can do Wong into a Drax into either an Arnim Zola or an Odin to re-trigger that ability. We know they can push 5 additional here. We just need to be aware of that and try to outpower them where possible. But either way, I think we go with the Wong play here. I don't think it's ever Wong to go Wong. The Drax, which they got from us, they play in Baxter Building, but they get the read wrong. So that's really, really big for us. We do have the instant Daredevil read here, so we'll be able to know where they drop power. If we can trigger our Drax in the far right, maybe we go with that. But they have an Arrow play. So we can do Drax here, and then we can do a double Doctor Doom as a way to push additional power across the board. I think we're okay with this, right? They could always Odin the arrow again, which pulls it back over, but we have a wide Doctor Doom. And so even if it pulls it over here, we push power here and here. Yeah. We ended up snapping because we had a pretty strong lead, but it's another one cuber. We are seeing that, I don't know why, but with global launch, we're seeing a lot more like tighter play. Not just from Safety Blade. Maybe I need to snap a little bit more advantageously. They were in a very hard to win position there. But just in general, this deck has given me a lot of like 1 and 2 cube games, whereas before you'd probably be able to cheat 4 and 8 cube games out of it. Let's do one more. Typically I stop at 7 games, but let's do one more. I feel like we need a big win. I feel like we need a big win that goes all the way to the finish and doesn't end early. All right, so next up we have Unit 0. Now Unit 0 is a pretty good player. We've matched up with them several times. Hopefully we have a good match here. We get the Tinker's Workshop, but we don't have any 2-cost cards, so we're not going to be able to make use of the extra energy here, unfortunately. They, however, do. They capitalize with a Scorpion to reduce the power of our cards by 1. We do get a turn 7, so Limbo is a pretty big lane for us. We have an additional turn to draw into our Thor, to juice our overall kind of cheeky playline. I'm actually going to hold our Rocket for a more advantageous lane or reason to drop him. So from that Daily Bugle effect, I think that's the first time I looked at it. It was pretty sleek. It has the newspaper, which has the card that you're pulling in it. Very, 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 very cool animations and graphics on it. Just like the overall feel of it. But let's go with a Thor into the Limbo lane. We need to start pushing some power. On turn 5, we can actually use their Sarah so that we can start dropping a lot more cards onto the board. If it looks like that may be a play line that we want to go with. Ooh, they use our Groot to great effect, and they actually get the trigger in Limbo. Unfortunately, they read us like a book, and they match our play in the Limbo lane. Now we could do Daredevil to see what they play on turn 5. Actually, I think that's probably what we end up going with, right? We could do a Daredevil and a Rocket. Most likely we don't trigger the Rocket, but I think we push them both onto the board anyways. And then that'll allow us to see, oh, they don't play anything on turn 4. Very interesting. Very interesting, Unit 0. We'll get the read on what they drop for turn 5. Probably their Sarah play that we copied from them, which we may or may not utilize. I don't know that we drop it either way, but so they do drop their Sarah. If we drop our Sarah to counter it, at that point, it allows us to do a 4-cost Gamora, a 2-cost Groot, a 5-cost Odin. At that point, we could do a Doctor Doom next turn into an... I guess we could do that anyways. Into an Odin. Is the Sarah play worth it, or is the guaranteed Gamora trigger more advantageous for us? I think that's the question that we find ourselves faced with. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. But what we're going to do is we're going to go with the Gamora. The 11 power play, potentially 12, but it becomes 11 because it was impacted by Scorpion, I think is such a strong play with that guaranteed trigger that it's hard to pass it up. So they have Sarah, so they're going to start flooding cards onto the board. Let's go with a Wong and a Star-Lord. We can either go with a Odin after that to push a large amount of power. Maybe we get a Mjolnir, and then that way we can win here, we can win here. We also have the potential to do a large Doctor Doom play as well. So let's go ahead and snap off of that tempo swing that we got with Gamora. They are going to be able to play a lot of cards. They have a full hand size here. But I think we feel pretty lucky. We do have one additional turn. So we're going to extend it to game 7 here. I think the double Doctor Doom or the quadruple with 6 times, I don't know what that would be. Triggering Mjolnir 6 times would offer a huge power push in the Thor lane as well. And so we get the Star-Lord to trigger twice. It's an 8 power play for a 10 power overall swing in that lane. They drop a Ronin, which could feel better. If we can top deck into Mjolnir, that is so beautiful. It almost brings tears to the eyes. So for anybody that doesn't know the Wong and Odin interaction, in the last patch, they updated the way that it works. So if we drop Mjolnir, that is going to trigger 2 times because of Wong. Odin will then trigger twice to re-trigger all of the on reveal abilities, but each of those on reveals are going to trigger twice because of the Wong, and so it'll trigger our Star-Lord and our Mjolnir 4 more times. So Mjolnir is going to go 6 times, So that's going to be a 39 power Thor in the limbo lane. And since we snapped early, I think they have a better chance of staying here. This feels like that big power play game that we've been looking for. Unit 0, if you hear me somewhere, please stay. We need this. We need this. So they do a huge power push into Tinkerer's Workshop, but that is not going to be enough. We have the Odin play, which will push us ahead in the Ronin lane. We have the Mjolnir, which will trigger twice. Our Star-Lord is not going to re-trigger, but that's absolutely fine. We don't need it to, because their Ronin is only 13 power. We're not going to push anything else into our hand. Their Maximus was pretty big. It almost got them to a win condition in Daily Bugle by making us draw into 2 additional cards. But the quadruple trigger of Mjolnir is... it's so tough to beat. Even with the strong Shang-Chi play, it's just not quite able to get there. So that does feel like finally we got a game to play until completion. We've been having a lot of retreats. We set up a beautiful play, and then the opponent ends up retreating. And so that feels like a good place to end. We had the massive, almost 40 power Thor. We had the Odin that was protecting the Star-Lord in the Daily Bugle, because he would have triggered 4 more times for 3 power each, so another 12 power on the Star-Lord. It could have potentially been a 20 power Star-Lord. So I think they did the best with what they had at hand, but it just wasn't quite enough. With that win, we are going to go ahead and end the video here. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. It helps the algorithm. It helps YouTube spread the content to other viewers so that they can enjoy it as well. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.